when we have special events here, when we baptize a baby, or welcome new members, or sometimes just for the heck of it, one of the things that we do is we share together in reading the statement of faith of our United Church of Christ. And it's broken up into different sections, but one section talks about being the church. And it reads, "You call us into your church to accept the cost and the joy of discipleship, to be your servants in the service of others, to proclaim the gospel in all the world, to resist the powers of evil, to share in Christ's baptism and eat at his table, to join him in his passion and victory." It talks about cost and joy. And usually when we get together on Sunday mornings, we would much rather lean into that joy part. The joy of being in community together. The joy of worshiping God as a company of believers. The joy of knowing the presence of Christ in our hearts as we go out into the world and face what can be a pretty brutal place at times. And there are Christians out there who behave as though joy is the only thing that our faith ever brings us. But in the UCC, we recognize that it's not always like that. That there are costs associated with our faith. In Luke's gospel, Jesus admonishes his hearers who want to be disciples, who want to follow him, to ask themselves, are they ready and willing to pay the cost that following him entails? And he talks about building a tower. Which among you would build a tower without stopping first to figure out how much it's going to cost you? Because if you go out there and build half a tower and have to stop, all the neighbors are going to laugh and point. I served a church in Maryland many years ago, a big gray stone pile of a church. And it has a squat tower on the front that's simply capped with some aluminum roofing. And when you ask about that tower, people who are in the know will tell you that there's supposed to be a steeple on it. But that as they were raising the funds to build the church, they said, we don't have the money now. And they built the little tower with the hopes that one day they'd build the steeple to go on top. And now, 150 years later, nobody has built a steeple. And for that congregation, they've kind of settled into that. That's their church. It doesn't have a steeple. That's okay. There's no law that says that churches have to have steeples. But when I was serving there, it was always sort of a head scratcher. Somebody didn't plan so very well. Or, Jesus goes on, which of you, if you were a ruler and had an army of 20,000 advancing against you, with only 10,000 soldiers under your command, wouldn't stop and ask the question, are we going to get creamed? And if you realize you couldn't stand up against the 20,000, which one of you wouldn't go out very quickly and make terms of peace? There's some math that's really important in life sometimes. Knowing what things are going to cost. Now, things cost different things for different people. And in the first century, a time when people could hold slaves, there was a slave named Onesimus who ran away from his owner, Philemon, and made his way to Rome, where the Apostle Paul was in prison. And Onesimus made himself useful caring for Paul. Paul doesn't begin to tell us what Onesimus did for him. But I imagine it was some very simple things. Providing a supportive presence, being a visitor, bringing him some meals from outside. Because prison food in the first century was nothing to write home about. I expect that Onesimus prayed with Paul, that he was Paul's eyes and ears in the outside community, that he was a messenger for Paul going forth to talk to the Christians in Rome, to deliver some of those messages of hope that even in prison, Paul tried to convey to the faithful. And one day, Paul realized that this ad hoc situation wasn't going to work. And he drafted the letter to Philemon that Zach read for us so well today. All 25 verses. It's a short little letter. And he rolled it up, and he put it in Onesimus' hand and said, "Take this back to your owner. Have him read it in church." I wonder what Onesimus felt at that moment. Being told to go back to his owner that he'd run away from. Being told to take this letter that was supposed to be read in front of everybody with a seal on it. Yeah, it's a sealed letter. It's not something that Onesimus is reading to see what it says before he delivers it. But he takes it. He goes back and hands the scroll to Philemon. And then, in the company of the saints, Philemon cracks the seal, opens it up, and reads it out loud. It's one of these great letters where Paul, an older man in prison for his faith, pulls out all the stops. He leans into the guilt trip like nobody can. Paul, an old man who has suffered for the faith. And you can hear the emotion dripping out of it. Asks Philemon to free his servant, Onesimus. And I will pay you for it, he says. But I don't even mention what you owe me. I'll pay you, but I don't even mention that you owe me your very self. Paul wants a very clear result. Receive Onesimus back not as a slave, but as a brother. I imagine Philemon reading this aloud in front of everybody. It'd be bad enough if he had to just read it on his own silently, but he has just read this appeal from the apostle in front of everybody. He can't just tuck it in his pocket now and pretend that it never arrived. He is to deal with this appeal, to set free his slave that cost him good money, and instead to treat Onesimus as a brother in Christ. How much do you suppose that cost? Dollars and cents. The cost of a slave in the ancient world wasn't chump change. Paul is asking him to absorb that financial cost in setting free his slave. And of course, in doing so, Paul teaches us a lesson. Sometimes faithfulness has a literal cost. In the United States, the cost of the abolition of slavery was incalculable. Not just the financial cost of the Civil War, but the human and cultural cost, a cost that we're still paying today. A cost that has been with us down through the ages and probably will be with us forever. Being Christian, treating people justly, costs. Always. I think about other costs. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, one of my absolute favorite saints of the church, who left Germany in the 1930s, who came to New York, who taught at Union Seminary, realized that if he didn't go back to Germany, he wouldn't be able to be part of rebuilding Germany after Hitler's rule. And so he left the comfort and security of life in New York and went back. He became a professor in the underground seminary that taught the gospel rather than signing loyalty oaths to Hitler. Bonhoeffer famously wrote that if he saw a madman driving a car into a crowd of people, he would be compelled to wrestle the steering wheel from the man's hand. And though Bonhoeffer had been a pacifist throughout his life, he looked at the situation in Germany and became involved in the plot to wrestle the wheel from the madman's hand. He was arrested, and days before the Allies arrived at the Flossenburg concentration camp, was executed. Bonhoeffer paid the cost of discipleship. There are plenty of stories from that era, stories like Maximilian Kolbe, who volunteered to take the place of a Jewish man who was scheduled to be executed. The Catholic Church recognizes Maximilian Kolbe as a saint for his actions. But there are plenty of other places where we find the cost of discipleship. The simple little ones. Dropping a check in the offering plate is a very small cost of discipleship. But living our lives in a Christian way is perhaps an even greater cost. The cost of standing with the oppressed, always. That can affect us negatively in some people's eyes. The cost of doing business with a concern for others' welfare and not merely our own. But you know, I think the greatest cost of our discipleship comes from the realization that we're never able to hold ourselves apart from others. That realization that whenever anyone suffers, we are called to suffer with them. That we are called to invest for their betterment and not just pile up our own nest eggs. We're called to pay the cost of saving our planet, even if it's cheaper to buy things produced in the third world and environmentally unsound ways. Lots of little costs rolled into our faith, aren't there? It's the kind of thing that I imagine could send some people straight out the door of the church saying, no, it's too much. I'd much rather just take care of myself. I want to make sure that when I go to the store, I pay the absolute least amount possible. Because the most important thing in the world is me. I imagine those people exist. Actually, I know a few of them. But they're not you. They're not us. We are people who understand that our faith calls us to give, to love, to reach out beyond ourselves, to pay that cost of faithfulness again and again and again, as a cost of who we are. My prayer then, for all of us, is that we might count the cost in advance, that we might know it's coming, and move forward as God's people anyway. Knowing that our connection with our siblings around the world is worth that cost. That cost is indeed an investment in the reign of God. As we share love, as we build justice, as we do God's work in the world. May we then count that cost and pay it cheerfully and faithfully. Amen.